When I retired at 71, I didn't imagine I'd be spending my twilight years measuring the weight of silence. After 4 decades of government service, orderly, uneventful, routine, I thought I'd earned a stretch of peace. Not grand vacations, or second homes, or yacht clubs. Just peace. A small condo I owned outright, enough money coming in monthly to live comfortably, and a few books I'd always meant to read but never got around to. That was all I needed. Or so I told myself. My daughter, Liana, had other ideas. She was always the high flyer. Even as a child, she kept score of grades, trophies, compliments. It wasn't enough to win. She had to be seen winning. When she started her own security company at 29 and landed a few juicy government contracts, I was proud of her. I still am, somewhere beneath all this disappointment. But somewhere along the way, her success calcified into something else. A kind of quiet judgment that followed me like a shadow. After my mild stroke last fall, nothing major, just a warning bell, I stayed with her for a few weeks to recover. I didn't ask till she offered. But almost immediately, I began to feel like a guest in my own life. The little comments. You sure you're not forgetting your pills again, Dad? Maybe you shouldn't be driving anymore. And once, when she thought I was asleep on the couch, I overheard her telling a friend on the phone, he's just not the man he used to be. I can't leave him alone for long. That stung. She asked about my finances one night over dinner. So what's your pension like now, Dad? You ever think about budgeting apps? I could help set one up. She said it lightly, like a joke, but her eyes were all calculation. I saw it then. This wasn't concern. It was inventory. That night, I made a choice I never thought I would. I lied. I told her my pension was only $800 a month, enough to cover basic groceries and maybe my prescription meds. I said it with a sigh, even managed to look embarrassed. The look on her face, I'll never forget it. That flicker of pity, quickly masked by what she probably thought was compassion. And then the inevitable offer. Dad, I think I've got a solution, she said, setting her wine glass down like it was a contract. Why don't you come work for me? Just part-time. Security's light at night. You just sit at the front desk, check the cameras, make sure no one sneaks in. And I'll throw in a couple hundred a month to help with expenses. She smiled, proud of herself, as if she just solved a difficult puzzle. I felt something hollow out inside me in that moment. My own daughter, offering me a handout wrapped in a job I didn't need, didn't ask for, and certainly didn't want. Not because the work was beneath me, I've never believed in that, but because of what it meant. That in her eyes, I was someone to be managed. A liability. I didn't argue. I just nodded, thanked her, and said I'd think about it. Then I waited 2 nights, packed my bags quietly after she'd gone to bed, and called a cab. I left a note on the kitchen table. Thanks for everything. I'll be fine on my own. It wasn't until I got back to my condo, the quiet humming around me like a blanket, that I sat down and began to rewrite my will. Her name had been there for 25 years. I deleted it in a single keystroke. And then I started writing the letter. Not out of spite, not even out of anger, but because I knew, with every beat of my heart, that she didn't see me anymore. Not as a man, not as her father, just as a figure to pity and prop up. And I couldn't let that stand. It didn't take long for Liana to notice I was gone. I left on a Thursday night, and by Friday afternoon, her name lit up my phone 3 times in a row. No voicemail, just the silent urgency of missed calls. Then came the texts. Dad, where are you? Why would you leave like that? You could have just told me you didn't want the job. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't trust myself to speak yet. I needed to be sure of what I was feeling, not just the anger, but the grief underneath it. The kind you don't cry about, the kind that settles in your chest and makes you question if the years you gave, the sacrifices you made, ever really counted for anything. She made me feel like a burden wrapped in a favor. And worse than that, she didn't even realize it. On Sunday morning, she showed up at my condo. I watched her from the window, standing at the door, frowning at the second-hand carpet in the hallway like it offended her. She knocked, not frantically, just firm and controlled, like always. I didn't open. Not then. I waited until she left a note under the door, folded twice, and still warm from her hand. Dad, please talk to me. I was just trying to help. Call me. I sat with that note for hours, turning it over like it might reveal some hidden meaning. But it was just paper. Just words. No apology. No recognition of what she'd done. Just damage control. And still, a part of me ached for her. My only child. The girl who used to sit on my lap and read the same bedtime book 3 times in a row. Where had that girl gone? The next day, I finally called her back. Not because I forgave her, but because I wanted to hear her say it. I needed to know if she truly believed she'd done no wrong. "Dad," she answered on the first ring. "Thank God. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just needed space. You could have told me. I thought something happened. I even checked the hospitals." Her voice cracked a little then, and I almost softened. "Almost. You offered me a job like I was one of your employees," I said. "Like I was a problem you were solving." "I was trying to help," she said quickly. "You told me you only had $800 a month, Dad. That's nothing. I thought you were too proud to ask." "That's exactly it," I said, louder than I intended. "You thought. You decided. You didn't ask me how I felt about any of it. You just offered me a security job and a $200 tip like I was your old gardener." Her silence on the line felt like a chasm. "I didn't mean it like that," she said, finally. "You know I love you." "No," I said. "I think you love the version of me you've built in your head. The one who's helpless, who needs you, who makes you feel like a good daughter for stepping in. But that's not who I am." She started to say something, probably a defense or an excuse, but I hung up. Not out of cruelty, but because I couldn't bear to listen to another word that sidestepped the truth. The next morning, I pulled out the letter I'd started writing. I'd only written a few lines that night, unsure if I'd ever send it. But after that call, I knew it needed to be finished. I needed her to see me clearly, even if it was too late. I sat at my desk with the kind of focus I hadn't felt in years, more clarity than anger, more resolve than pain. I wrote slowly, deliberately, like I was chiseling each word into stone. This wasn't a letter to hurt her. It was a reckoning. "Liana, I lied to you. My pension isn't $800 a month. It's $5,000. That's before the income from the 2 properties I rent out, which gives me another $2,400 or so. I don't have any debts. I'm not struggling. I've never been more financially secure in my life." I paused after that paragraph, letting the ink dry as if it could settle the tremor in my hand. Even writing the truth down made me feel exposed, like I was opening a door she had no right to walk through anymore. But I kept going. "You once told me I was too proud. Maybe I am. But pride is the last thing a man has when everything else is stripped away. And when you offered me that job, when you tacked on that $200 as if I were a charity case, I saw something in your face I hadn't seen before. You didn't look at me like your father. You looked at me like a project, a burden, a man you were tolerating, not honoring. I lied to test you, yes. And maybe that wasn't fair. But I needed to know how you'd respond when you thought I had nothing. And now I do. You offered me work, not warmth. A shift schedule, not support. There was no 'come live here as long as you need, Dad, or we'll figure this out together.' Just a solution. A paycheck. A performance of compassion." My throat tightened as I wrote that part. The words bled out of me with years of unsaid things. Things I'd buried so she wouldn't feel guilty, so I wouldn't feel petty. But the lie, my lie, had unearthed everything. When you were 10, you sprained your ankle in gym class. You didn't want me to carry you in front of your classmates because you thought it would make you look weak. I carried you anyway. You clung to my neck like I was the only thing anchoring you to the world. I didn't care who was watching. That's what love looks like. It doesn't calculate. It doesn't ask for dignity in return. What you gave me wasn't love. It was obligation disguised as generosity. And I won't accept that anymore. I sealed the envelope with a trembling hand and walked it to the mailbox like it was a verdict. There was no satisfaction in it. Just finality. 2 days later, she called again. I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to explain the letter over the phone. She'd read it soon enough. When the knock came on Thursday morning, I already knew it would be her. I watched her from the window again, only this time, she didn't look poised. She looked stunned. Her shoulders were tight, her jaw clenched. She held the open letter in her hand like it was a betrayal. I opened the door, wordless. "You think you're teaching me a lesson?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You think this was some noble test?" I said nothing, just motioned for her to sit if she wanted to. She didn't. That was cruel, she continued. To lie like that, to manipulate me. No, I interrupted. What's cruel is pretending to care while demeaning someone behind a smile. I was trying to help. She snapped. I thought you were broke. You thought I was weak, I said calmly. And you treated me like I was. She looked away then, blinking hard. I could tell she wanted to cry, but wouldn't. Not in front of me. That would be surrender. I've always tried to be a good daughter, she said, her voice trembling. I know, I replied. But trying isn't the same as seeing someone clearly. I didn't lie to punish you, Liana. I lied because I needed to know if your love was real or transactional. Now I know. She stood in the doorway for a long time after that, like she couldn't decide whether to argue or apologize. In the end, she did neither. She just walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence returned. But this time, it didn't feel so empty. I didn't expect her to come back. Not after the way she stormed out. But 2 days later, she did, this time knocking softer, almost tentative. I didn't move from my chair by the window. I let the knock hang there like a question. When I finally opened the door, she wasn't angry. Just tired. And something in her eyes had shifted. Less fire, more fog. She didn't say hello. Just stepped inside like she didn't know where else to go. I read the letter again, she said, her voice quieter now. This time I actually read it. Not just the money part. I watched her as she spoke, the way she stood near the bookshelf like she needed something solid to lean on. This wasn't the daughter who ran board meetings or negotiated contracts. This was the little girl who used to bring me drawings with crooked hearts and glitter-glued names. You think I don't love you, she said. But that's not true. I stayed silent. I've learned that silence, in moments like this, has weight. It forces people to sit with their own words instead of defending them. She sighed. I get it. I came off cold. I made you feel like you were a problem I needed to solve. But I didn't mean it that way. I didn't know what to do. You scared me, Dad, when you had the stroke, and I didn't know how to help without making you feel as small. I offered, gently. She winced. Yeah, I guess. I thought offering you the job was practical. I thought it would give you something to do. And the extra money, look, I know how that sounded now. But I wasn't trying to insult you. You weren't trying to, I said, nodding slowly. But you did. Because you saw me as someone less. Not out of malice, but out of assumption. You assumed I had nothing, and you responded with pity instead of partnership. That's what stung. She looked away, blinking fast. You could have just told me the truth. And would you have believed it? I asked, not bitter, just honest. She didn't answer. We stood there in the quiet for a while. She didn't sit. Neither did I. I took you out of my will, I said finally. Her head jerked slightly, like a twitch. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Just a flicker of hurt across her face that she couldn't hide in time. Not because I don't love you, I continued. But because love, real love, requires more than DNA and duty. It requires presence. It requires humility. And right now, I don't feel like you see me as your father. Just an obligation with a pulse. Her shoulders sagged. So what now? She asked, barely above a whisper. I looked at her and, for a moment, saw both the little girl I raised and the woman I didn't fully recognize anymore. Now, I said, we take space. We relearn how to talk to each other without expectation. I'm not asking for perfection, Liana. I'm asking for respect. For honesty. For connection that isn't rooted in guilt. And the will. I gave her a small, sad smile. That's not what matters right now. What matters is whether we can find our way back to something real. She nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. She walked out slower this time. Not in anger, but in thought. She didn't slam the door. She just closed it quietly behind her, like she finally understood the weight of what had been broken. I sat back down in my chair by the window, the light shifting on the floor. The letter sat open on my desk, its truth still echoing in the room. I didn't know if we'd ever fully repair what had cracked, but I knew one thing for certain. I had drawn my line. And for the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Days passed, and the phone didn't ring. No texts, no emails, no just checking in calls. It was as though my daughter had slipped into the ether, swallowed by the enormity of a truth too uncomfortable to revisit. At first, I waited. Every morning, I checked my phone like it might bloom into something. I told myself I didn't care, that I needed the peace. But the silence was loud. It pressed in from the walls, crowded the room, filled every corner of the condo with a question. Was it worth it? I reminded myself that I had lived alone before. I made coffee the same way I always had, walked to the corner shop for my newspaper, watched the same black and white movies I loved. But everything felt different now, colored by that last conversation. We hadn't yelled. We hadn't broken anything. But a fracture doesn't have to be violent to be permanent. Sometimes the worst breaks are the quiet ones. A part of me wanted to reach out, just to say I was thinking of her, that I hoped she was okay. But then I'd remember her face when she offered me that job, the rehearsed compassion in her voice, the hollow smile. I'd remember the slow erosion of respect, and the fact that I had to lie to see the truth. No, I couldn't be the one to fix this. Not this time. Instead, I filled the void with memory. Old photographs, boxes of letters from her childhood, her mother's faded handwriting on birthday cards. I found one drawing Liana had made when she was 8, a stick figure version of me, wearing a cape and holding her in one arm like a superhero. The caption said, "My dad saves everything." I sat with that for a long time, staring at it until the lines blurred. She had worshipped me once, believed in me. How had we gotten so far from that? I began to grieve. Not just for the silence, but for everything I couldn't say. For the years where I put her first, always. The tuition, the rent when she was just starting out, the time I gave up a promotion to stay close when she was sick in college. None of it felt like a sacrifice at the time. It felt like love. It was love. But now, it felt invisible. Forgotten. One afternoon, a neighbor knocked to ask if I wanted to join their book club. I almost said no, but something in me hesitated. I said yes. I started going to the community center on Tuesdays, playing chess with a man named Howard who talked more about his late wife than the game. I found myself drawn to the rhythm of small talk, the simple human contact that didn't come loaded with history or expectation. Liana sent one message a few weeks later. Just one. "I've been thinking about everything. I'm sorry." That was all. No questions. No follow-up. I stared at it for a long time before I finally replied. "I believe you. But I need time." She didn't write back. And that was okay. For the first time in our relationship, I had created a boundary. Not to push her away, but to protect myself. To heal on my terms. I realized then that part of being a parent, especially to adult children, is learning when to stop saving them. When to let them fall or flail or sit with the mess they helped make. The silence was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer an accusation or a wound. It had become a space. A boundary. A breath. And in that breath, I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. By the time summer came around, the air in the condo felt easier to breathe. Not because anything had mended with Liana, but because I had stopped hoping it would, at least not right away. There's a certain peace that comes with surrendering the idea that family will always understand you just because you share blood. We may love each other, yes, but understanding? That takes more work than most people are willing to do. I visited my lawyer that June. Sat across from her polished desk and slid over the updated will, initials on every page. No more ambiguity. Everything now would go to a scholarship fund for low-income students, and a distant cousin in Oregon who'd once sent me a birthday card every year without fail, even though we hadn't seen each other since I was 40. She'd never asked me for anything. Never made me feel less. The lawyer raised her eyebrows when she saw Liana's name missing. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I am," I said. "It's not about revenge. It's about peace." And it was. Pure and simple. I didn't want my final act in this life to be an attempt to buy love. I'd already paid enough for that currency, and it never spent well. Afterward, I took the long route home, driving past the old neighborhood where Liana grew up, the schoolyard where I taught her to ride a bike, the house we lived in before her mother passed, the park where we scattered her ashes. It all felt like someone else's life now. Still familiar, still meaningful, but distant, like a dream I used to have often but hadn't revisited in years. At the park, I sat on a bench and watched a young father chasing his daughter through the grass. She shrieked with delight, her ponytail bouncing, her tiny shoes kicking up clumps of clover. The man caught her, hoisted her up, spun her around while she giggled like it was the only sound in the world that mattered. And I felt it. That old ache. Not regret, exactly. More like nostalgia laced with mourning, for the years when Liana looked at me that way. With uncomplicated love. With trust. Before life, ambition, pride, and distance wrapped around her heart like armor. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. That night, back in the condo, I sat down at the kitchen table and poured myself a glass of wine. Just one. I toasted quietly, not to Liana, not to the past, but to myself. To the man who finally learned that setting a boundary doesn't make you cruel. It makes you whole. I thought about calling her. I really did. Just to say, I still love you. But I knew that message would mean nothing if it came from a place of weakness. And I was done making the first move. Done folding myself into shapes just to keep the peace. I had written the truth, spoken it, and lived it. The rest was up to her. I watched the sun dip below the edge of the buildings, the golden light spilling across the kitchen floor. It was quiet, yes. But it was the kind of quiet I had earned. I stood alone, and I was okay with that. What would you have done in his shoes? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your peace? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoy real-life family drama with raw emotion and tough choices, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.